That's such a fitting intro for what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about teacher pensions, a super exciting topic. But I do have, it's sort of a pitch. Just like Sanford, just like Danielle, it's a pitch for you all to invest in a topic, an issue, learning about it, and doing something in your state. It's not a sexy topic. It's not something that is going to, there's no cool houses I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you students and pictures of kids in this slide deck, but I will talk to you about how it's affecting all of your work. Whether you like it or not, it's affecting everything you want to do in your state, whether you care about charter schools, whether you care about equity, whether you care about distribution of resources. Pensions are something you need to pay attention to. I'm Chad Aldeman. I work at a nonprofit called Bellwether Education Partners. We are dedicated to improving the lives of underserved youth. We run this funny little site called teacherpensions.org, and I've been doing it about a decade now. And whether we like it or not, it's a growing need, both for policy and teachers. The site is growing in traffic like gangbusters, 50% year-over-year growth every single year. We have teachers that are Googling for information that they cannot get from their own site, from their own state. They're asking me information about their own pension plan in Idaho or Texas. And so there's a need out there that's not being met. All right, I'm going to tell you 5 things you need to know. There's a lot more on our site, but hopefully if you learn these 5 things, you'll get a very good understanding of how pension plans work. The first thing is that pension plans are expensive. Maybe you know that from what you read in the media. I'm going to talk to you about where the sources of that are and what it's doing to schools. Pension costs are mostly due to debt. There's a sort of a myth that pensions are supremely generous. I'm going to walk through that, and actually that's not quite true. The third thing is a big one. It's close to my heart. It's the reason that I got invested in this is that pension plans are not good for most teachers. They're not set up for the shape of the teacher workforce. The fourth one is something that we're still uncovering, but it's a new one, and it's sort of, I'm going to unpack how pensions amplify school funding inequities. They make both problems of teacher turnover and school finance equities worse. And the last one I'm going to show you a little bit about there are better options. We don't have to stick with the current system. All right, the first one is maybe obvious to a lot of you who read the news or are paying attention to school budgets. Pensions are really expensive right now. They have roughly tripled over the last 15 years. We're now spending about $50 billion a year on pension costs alone. That's about 11% of all education spending. That's, again, as a percentage of all spending, that's roughly doubled over the last 10 years. If you want to think about it per pupil, it's about $1,300 per pupil across the country. There's tremendous differences across state, but that's the national average. Most of this is not for benefits. People, I think, tend to say, well, pensions are so generous, and they look at someone who gets a pension of $100,000 or something like that. And there are winners under the current system. We're going to talk about that. But that is not representative of everybody. So the blue line you see is actually the average, what's called the normal cost of pensions. It's what the plan assumes across every single entrant in the plan. What is our benefit system worth? And on average, that's been going down. States have been cutting those benefits over time. And it's worth about 5% right now. If you think about a 401k match, I don't know what you all get, but 5% is a generous 401k match. It's not outstandingly generous or anything like that, but it's not a super generous benefit in the pension context either. What's driving the cost is that red line. That's the cost of unfunded liabilities that's gone up in the states. This slide is framed in terms of percentage of teacher salary. Right now, the average unfunded liability cost is about 12% of teacher salary. If you think about wanting to raise teacher salaries in your states, this is a supreme barrier to doing that and driving money actually to teachers' pockets. Just to make an obvious point, teachers can't buy childcare expenses. They can't take a vacation. They can't pay their mortgage and pension unfunded liability costs. They can't do it even in pension benefits because they have to wait to receive that when they retire, but they certainly can't do it in unfunded liabilities. This one is a big one. We have a lot of data on this. So what we've shown is that there are steep turnover profiles for teachers early in their career. And yet the plans that we're putting in them for retirement are very backloaded. So they have to stay a long time to get a decent benefit. In some states, they might have to stay 20, 30 years to get more than they've put into the system back out. So this is, of all new entrants, about half will leave without qualifying for any benefit at all. So they're paying into the system, the districts are paying into on their behalf, but they are gonna leave, and the only thing they're entitled to is their own contributions, sometimes with some interest, but usually no matching from the employer either. About a third of people, the darker, black images there represent the people who get some pension. They might have stayed 5, 10, 15 years, but the pension is not gonna be very good, and they're gonna be behind in terms of what they need for retirement savings. I'm gonna show a little bit a formula of how this works and who those people are. And the last, those blue teachers there, we think it's about 1/5 of the teacher population overall are what we would call pension winners. The people who do pretty well under the current system, they're getting much more than that average of 5%. They're the people who are often in the media as the people who have really generous pensions. But it's not always. Sometimes it's the principal who served for 30 years in your rural school. There are definitely people like that, and in every state they're spread out, they're geographically diverse and disparate, and they're powerful. They vote, and they know that the pension system did pretty well for them. But pension systems also make school finance equity problems worse. The pension plans are pretty simple. They have a very simple formula. They usually multiply together a multiplier. In this example, it's 2%. That's fairly representative of where plans are, times the final average salary, times years of experience. So they're literally multiplying those factors together. If anything is inequitable in those two variables, then the pension plan will exacerbate those inequities. And of course, we know that things like salary and years of experience are not equitably distributed. Some places are able to pay much higher salaries. Some places have much lower turnover. Some places recruit from other places within the state, and they actually benefit from that turnover. And so what happens is that the pension plans exacerbate any funding gaps. So if you think about in your state where you live, where are the places that have the most stable workforce, that have low turnover rates, that have high salaries? Those are the places that are getting the best deal from the pension plan. And think about the opposite. Where are the places that have high turnover, that can't afford to pay high salaries? And those are the places that are losing from the plan. So this is a graph. We did analysis in Illinois, and the state was spending more overall on, they were spending more for kids who didn't have high, I'm saying this wrong. They were spending more in low poverty areas overall, but then the pension plan on top of that added even more disparity. And it can work out to quite a bit of money per pupil if you do the math. So the last is talking about there are better options. I think in the pension context, it's often framed as, well, the pension is a promise we have to deliver on. It's true, we do have to deliver on the promises. The debts that I mentioned earlier have to be paid off. Those are promises to current and future retirees. Sometimes there are legal obligations, not to mention political and moral ones. Those are promises. But that doesn't mean we have to be stuck in this system forever. Most states have been cutting benefits over time, preserving the basic structure, but making the benefits worse. But there are alternatives. Most of you in this room, I imagine, are in the far left, a defined contribution plan, where it's up to you to decide how much to contribute. It's up to you to decide how to invest. And so there's a lot of employee choice, a lot of employee risk as well. If you don't save enough, if your investments don't do well, then you'll be left with not a secure retirement. But there are ways to structure that better than others. Over time, we've improved that. We have things like low-cost mutual funds or target date funds to help people invest based on their age. Another option is called a cash balance guaranteed return plan. It's not very well known, but what it does is it guarantee a steady rate of return, usually more conservative than what pension plans assume, but that guarantee is a nice benefit for workers. The benefits tend to grow more linearly as opposed to a back-end spike. That is not that common, but there are some plans, like for example, the Texas county and municipal employees. There's about 400,000 that are in 2 different cash balance guaranteed return plans. Another option is the hybrid plan. It's a combination of a pension and a defined contribution. Usually those are lower and smaller, both of them, but they combine to have some portability, less risk on the investment side. Another option is just to give employees choice. So at the higher ed level, and most colleges and universities and public colleges and universities, they get a choice between what they want to enroll in. Should they be in the pension plan? Should they be in a more portable defined contribution plan? Those are often structured very well, high contribution rates from the employer side, et cetera, reputable investment advisors like TIAA, et cetera. But K-12 systems have not given teachers choice, not nearly in the same numbers. There's about 7 states that give teachers a choice, whereas in the higher ed sector, it's almost universal. So if you're interested, if I've made a compelling pitch for you today, I will say a couple things that you could do. One is document the costs. So just take a moment to understand where the dollars in your state are going and what that means for your employers who are making decisions and employees as well. Start a conversation. Pensions are sort of not talked about that much, particularly for young and people who aren't thinking about it, but it does matter for them. It matters putting everybody on a path of secure retirement. The last is that the politics on this are tough. I won't make any bones about that, but it's worth it, and everything that you're trying to do, whether that's on equity, whether that's on school choice, whether that's just on teacher quality, pensions have implications there. So there's a lot more resources on our website, teacherpensions.org. We have state resources. We're also happy to act as a resource for you all if you have any questions. So thanks for your time.